just before he was getting ready to go to Germany. He was in the Army, and he had private roller skating parties at Rainbow Skating Rink, and my cousin had grown up with him in school. And
I tried to save him, and he never forgave me for it. Red West said those words in an interview years after Elvis Presley's death, and his voice broke when he said them. For over 20 years, Red had been more than Elvis's bodyguard. He was a childhood friend from Humes High School in Memphis, a man who had thrown the first punch to protect Elvis from bullies when they were teenagers, and someone Elvis trusted enough to keep at his side through fame, addiction, paranoia, and the slow collapse that defined the final years. But in 1977, Red West did something that cost him everything. He told the truth. He wrote a book called Elvis, What Happened, that exposed the prescription drug abuse, the violent mood swings, and the enabling that was killing the king. The book was released on August 1st, 1977. Elvis died 16 days later, and Red spent the rest of his life carrying the weight of that timing, wondering if the truth he tried to tell had come too late or if it had pushed Elvis over the edge. According to people who knew Red, there was footage that never made it into documentaries or interviews. Raw recordings where Red described specific nights, hotel rooms where Elvis barely knew who he was, moments where Red begged others to stop handing Elvis pills and was told to shut up and leave. So what did Red West see in those final years that convinced him Elvis was being helped to his death? What was in the unseen footage that was too disturbing to air? And why did the man who spent 2 decades protecting Elvis become the one person Elvis could never forgive? Red West was born Robert Gene West on March 8, 1936, in Memphis, Tennessee. And from the moment he met Elvis Presley at Humes High School in 1948, their lives were intertwined in ways that neither of them could have predicted. Red was a tough kid from a working-class family, the kind who could handle himself in a fight, and was not afraid to stand up to bullies who targeted weaker students. Elvis was quieter, more sensitive, a mama's boy who dressed differently and listened to music that the other kids did not understand. He was the kind of kid who got picked on for being different, for not fitting in with the rough Memphis teenagers who valued toughness over sensitivity. They became friends almost by accident. Red noticed Elvis getting hassled in the hallways, and something about the way Elvis carried himself, refusing to back down even when he was clearly outmatched, earned Red's respect. The friendship solidified one afternoon in the school bathroom when a group of boys cornered Elvis, planning to beat him up for some perceived slight, or just because they could. Red walked in, saw what was happening, and did not hesitate. He threw the first punch, driving the bullies back, and made it clear that anyone who wanted to mess with Elvis would have to go through him first. Elvis never forgot that moment. Years later, when reporters asked him why Red West was always at his side, Elvis would tell that story, his voice softening as he described how Red had stood up for him when no one else would. In Elvis's mind, Red was not just an employee or a bodyguard. He was a brother, someone who had proven his loyalty before there was money or fame involved. Back when Elvis was just a poor kid with a dream, and Red was just a friend who had his back. In 1955, as Elvis's career began to explode, he called Red and asked him to come work for him full-time. The offer was not about professionalism or qualifications. Elvis did not need a trained security expert. He needed someone he trusted, someone who would protect him not just from physical threats, but from the isolation and paranoia that fame was already beginning to create. Red said yes immediately, and that decision shaped the rest of his life. Red became part of what would later be known as the Memphis Mafia, the group of friends, cousins, and employees who surrounded Elvis constantly throughout the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. The group included Sonny West, Red's cousin, who also became a bodyguard; Joe Esposito, who managed logistics and acted as Elvis's road manager. Lamar Fike, Charlie Hodge, Jerry Schilling, and others who filled various roles but primarily existed to keep Elvis company, entertained, and insulated from the outside world. Red's official title was bodyguard, but his actual role was much broader and more complex. He drove Elvis places when Elvis did not want to be seen. He ran errands, picking up everything from prescription medications to jewelry that Elvis bought on impulse and gave away to strangers. He handled logistics for tours and film shoots, working as a stunt coordinator on many of Elvis's movies, and teaching Elvis how to throw convincing punches for fight scenes. He broke up fights in bars when fans got too aggressive. He intercepted obsessed fans who tried to get too close. And most importantly, he was someone Elvis could talk to in the middle of the night when the pills would not let him sleep and the loneliness became unbearable. Through the 1950s and 60s, Red had a front-row seat to Elvis's transformation from a poor kid from Tupelo into the biggest star in the world. He was there on June 5, 1956, when Elvis appeared on The Milton Berle Show and caused a national scandal with his hip movements. He was there when Elvis signed the contract with RCA Records that would make him a millionaire before he turned 21. He was there when Elvis bought Graceland in March 1957, a 23-room mansion that would become both his sanctuary and his prison. Red watched Elvis get drafted into the Army in 1958, and he saw the fear in Elvis's eyes that his career might be over by the time he came back. But Red also saw Elvis handle those 2 years in Germany with grace and discipline, earning the respect of his fellow soldiers and proving that he was more than just a pretty face with a guitar. Red was there when Elvis met Priscilla Beaulieu in Germany, a 14-year-old girl who would eventually become his wife, and Red saw the beginning of a relationship that was both romantic and deeply problematic. When Elvis returned from the Army in 1960, Red was there as Elvis restarted his career, this time under the complete control of Colonel Tom Parker, the manager who would make Elvis richer than he ever dreamed, but would also trap him in a cycle of bad movies and artistic compromise. Red worked on dozens of Elvis's films, and he watched Elvis's frustration grow with each formulaic script, each ridiculous plot, each soundtrack album filled with throwaway songs. Elvis wanted to be taken seriously as an actor. He wanted to make films like his idols James Dean and Marlon Brando. But Colonel Parker wanted money, and stupid beach movies with Elvis singing to pretty girls made money. Red also saw the good times, the moments when Elvis was genuinely happy, and the future seemed limitless. The parties at Graceland, where Elvis would rent out entire movie theaters or amusement parks just so his friends could have fun without crowds. The nights when Elvis would sit at the piano and play gospel music for hours, his voice soaring through the house with a purity that never made it onto his commercial recordings. The pranks and laughter and camaraderie that defined the Memphis Mafia at its best, when it felt like a group of brothers who would do anything for each other. But Red also saw the cracks forming early, long before most people realized how serious the problems would become. Elvis's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, controlled every aspect of his career with an iron grip that left no room for creativity or artistic growth. Elvis was pushed into making movies that were formulaic and beneath his talent, churning out 3 or 4 films a year that made money but did nothing for his artistic credibility or his self-respect. Films like Girl Happy and Harem Scarum and Spin Out were embarrassments, and Elvis knew it. He would come off set frustrated and angry, complaining to Red and the other guys that he was wasting his talent, that Colonel Parker was turning him into a joke. Elvis was isolated from the real world in ways that most people did not understand. He could not go to a restaurant without being mobbed. He could not walk down a street, or go to a movie theater, or do any of the normal things that regular people took for granted. So he stayed at Graceland, surrounded by the Memphis Mafia, a group of people who depended on him financially and emotionally, and who were expected to entertain him, agree with him, and be available 24 hours a day. The pressure of being Elvis Presley, of always being on and always performing even when the cameras were not rolling, was crushing. By the late 1960s, Elvis was exhausted in ways that went beyond physical tiredness. His marriage to Priscilla was strained by his infidelities, his obsessive need for control, and the fact that he seemed more comfortable with his entourage than with his wife. His movie career was stagnant, trapped in a cycle of terrible scripts that made money but destroyed his credibility. And he was turning to prescription medications to cope with insomnia, anxiety, and the constant pressure of being Elvis Presley. At first, the pills seemed harmless. Doctors prescribed sleeping pills to help Elvis rest after performances, and amphetamines to give him energy for long days on set. But Elvis had an addictive personality, and what started as medical treatment quickly spiraled into dependency. One sleeping pill became two became 5. And before long, Elvis was taking handfuls of medications every day, mixing uppers and downers in combinations that should have killed him, but somehow did not. At least, not right away. Red noticed the changes before most people did. He started seeing Elvis slur his words in the middle of conversations, stumble over furniture in his own house, lose track of what day it was or where he was supposed to be. He saw Elvis's moods swing wildly and unpredictably, from euphoric and generous, buying cars for everyone in sight, to paranoid and angry, convinced that people were plotting against him or stealing from him. And he saw the people around Elvis, the doctors and hangers-on who kept supplying the pills rather than saying no, because saying no to Elvis meant risking your job, your access, and your place in the inner circle. Dr. George Nicopolis, known universally as Dr. Nick, was Elvis's personal physician, and he prescribed medications in quantities that were beyond staggering. In the 7 months before Elvis's death, Dr. Nick prescribed over 10,000 pills to Elvis, including powerful opiates like Dilaudid, sedatives like Placidil and Quaalude, and stimulants like Dexedrine. These were not minor medications. These were drugs that could be fatal in even moderate doses, and Elvis was taking them by the handful, multiple times a day, every day. Other doctors contributed as well, writing prescriptions under fake names or for members of Elvis's entourage that were actually meant for Elvis himself. The system was designed to avoid detection by pharmacies and regulatory agencies, spreading the prescriptions across multiple doctors and multiple pharmacies so that no single source would flag the quantities as dangerous. It was a coordinated effort to keep Elvis supplied with pills, and everyone involved knew exactly what they were doing. Red confronted Dr. Nick more than once, pulling him aside after seeing Elvis pass out or become incoherent, asking him to cut back on the prescriptions to help Elvis get clean rather than feeding his addiction. Dr. Nick would respond that he was doing the best he could, that Elvis was an adult who made his own choices, and that if Dr. Nick refused to prescribe the medications, Elvis would find another doctor who would. At least this way, Dr. Nick argued, he could monitor Elvis and make sure the drugs came from legitimate sources rather than street dealers who might sell him something cut with poison. The logic made sense on the surface, but Red saw it for what it was: enabling disguised as care. Dr. Nick was not helping Elvis. He was prolonging his addiction and calling it medicine. And Red started to realize that everyone around Elvis, from the doctors to the Memphis Mafia members to Colonel Parker himself, had a vested interest in keeping Elvis functional enough to perform, but never healthy enough to take control of his own life. The breaking point for Red came during a tour in 1976, a year before Elvis's death. Elvis was performing in cities across the country, and the shows were becoming disasters. He forgot lyrics to songs he had sung thousands of times. He mumbled through performances, slurring words and missing cues. He sometimes had to leave the stage mid-show because he was too disoriented to continue, retreating backstage where Dr. Nick would give him another injection or another handful of pills to either wake him up or calm him down, depending on what the situation required. Red watched fans who had paid good money to see the King walk out, disappointed, confused, or genuinely concerned that something was seriously wrong with Elvis. Some fans cried, not from joy, but from witnessing what felt like watching a legend die in slow motion on stage. And Red felt complicit, like he was part of a machine that was destroying the person he loved most in the world. One night in a hotel room, the exact city lost to time, but the memory seared into Red's mind. Elvis was so incoherent that Red genuinely believed he was watching his friend die. Elvis had taken multiple sedatives, possibly combined with alcohol, and was barely conscious. He was slumped on a couch in the suite, his eyes half closed, his speech so slurred that Red could not understand what he was saying. His breathing was shallow and irregular. His skin looked gray. A small video camera, possibly belonging to a documentary crew that was filming parts of the tour or set up for security purposes, was recording in the room. Red, according to sources who have described the footage, can allegedly be seen and heard begging the people around Elvis to stop giving him pills, to call for medical help, to do something other than just let him keep spiraling toward death. His voice rises in the recording, going from pleading to angry as he demands that someone, anyone, take responsibility for what is happening. The response Red got was silence and avoidance. Some people left the room, unwilling to confront the reality of what they were witnessing. Others told Red to calm down, that Elvis was fine, that he just needed to sleep it off, and he would be okay by showtime tomorrow. And when Red pushed harder, insisting that Elvis needed real medical intervention, not more pills, he was told to mind his own business. One person allegedly said that if Red did not like how things were being handled, he could leave. The message was clear. Red could protect Elvis from outside threats, from aggressive fans and physical danger. But he could not protect Elvis from himself or from the people who were enabling his self-destruction. And anyone who tried would be pushed out. That was the moment Red realized that being loyal to Elvis meant something different than being loyal to the people who controlled access to Elvis. And he had to make a choice. In July 1976, Red West, his cousin Sonny West, and another bodyguard named Dave Hebler were all fired. The official reason was budget cuts. Elvis's finances were a mess, and Colonel Parker had decided that the entourage needed to be trimmed. But Red believed the real reason was that he had been too vocal about Elvis's drug use, too insistent that something needed to change. He had become a problem, and problems got eliminated. Being fired by Elvis was not just about losing a job or a paycheck. It was about losing a brother, a friendship that had defined Red's entire adult life. Red had spent over 20 years at Elvis's side, from the early days when Elvis was just a regional star, through the meteoric rise to global fame and into the decline. He had sacrificed relationships, opportunities for his own career, and any semblance of a normal life to be there for Elvis 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. He had missed his own children's milestones because Elvis needed him. He had put his marriage under strain because Elvis could call at 3 in the morning and expect Red to drop everything, and now he was being cast out, not because he had failed Elvis, but because he had tried too hard to help him. Red was angry, and his anger was justified. But beneath the anger was something deeper and more painful. He was hurt. He felt betrayed. And he was terrified that Elvis was going to die without anyone doing anything to stop it. The system around Elvis was designed to enable him, not to save him. Everyone from the doctors to the Memphis Mafia members to Colonel Parker himself had financial and emotional reasons to keep things exactly as they were, even if it meant watching Elvis slowly kill himself. So when a writer named Steve Dunleavy, a tabloid journalist with a reputation for sensationalism, approached Red, Sonny, and Dave about writing a tell-all book, Red said yes. He knew immediately that it would be seen as the ultimate betrayal. He knew Elvis would hate him for it. He knew fans would accuse him of exploiting Elvis for money. But he also believed, with every fiber of his being, that shocking Elvis and the world into facing the truth was the only chance left to save the king's life. The writing process happened quickly, almost urgently. Steve Dunleavy conducted extensive interviews with Red, Sonny, and Dave throughout late 1976 and early 1977. The three men described incident after incident, painting a picture of Elvis's life that was radically different from the public image. They talked about Elvis pulling guns on people, sometimes as a joke, but sometimes with genuine anger and paranoia. They described violent outbursts where Elvis would destroy hotel rooms, fire employees without cause, and become physically threatening toward people who disagreed with him. They detailed the prescription drug abuse in explicit terms, naming specific medications, describing the quantities Elvis consumed, and explaining how the system worked to keep him supplied. They described mornings when Elvis could not wake up without injections of stimulants, and nights when he could not sleep without massive doses of sedatives. They talked about Elvis's weight gain, his declining health, the way his hands shook, and the moments when he would become completely incoherent mid-sentence, lost in a fog of pharmaceuticals. But the book was not just an attack. Red, Sonny, and Dave also expressed love for Elvis throughout the manuscript. They described the good Elvis, the generous and kind man who would buy cars for strangers and donate money to charities without seeking publicity. They talked about Elvis's talent, his charisma, and the way he could light up a room when he was healthy and happy. And they made clear that their motivation for writing the book was not revenge or profit, but a desperate attempt to save someone they loved. The book, officially titled Elvis: What Happened, was completed in early 1977 and published on August 1st, 1977 by World News Corporation, a tabloid publisher that specialized in sensational celebrity exposés. The timing was unfortunate, but not calculated. The publisher wanted the book out while Elvis was still alive and touring, when public. Interest would be highest. No one anticipated that Elvis would die just 16 days later. The book was explosive from the moment it hit store shelves. Fans were horrified, refusing to believe that their idol could be capable of the behavior described. The mainstream media seized on the most sensational details, running headlines about drug abuse and violence that painted Elvis as a monster rather than a man struggling with addiction. And Elvis, according to people who were with him during those final weeks, was devastated. Elvis reportedly told people that Red had stabbed him in the back after everything he had done for him. He called the book Lies and Exaggerations, insisting that the authors were bitter ex-employees making up stories to make money off his name. He refused to read the book himself, relying on others to tell him what was in it, which meant he got the most inflammatory details without the context or the expressions of love that were also present throughout the manuscript. Some people close to Elvis claim that the book contributed to his death, that the betrayal he felt from Red was so profound that it pushed him further into drugs and depression. Others argue that Elvis was already so far gone that the book made no difference, that he was on a path toward death that nothing could have altered. The truth is probably somewhere in between. The book hurt Elvis deeply, but it did not create the problems. It only exposed them. But the book was not lies. Everything in it was true, and Red had documentation, recordings, and witnesses to back up every claim. The unseen footage that allegedly exists, raw interviews and recordings made during the writing of the book, reportedly includes Red describing specific incidents in painful detail. Nights when Elvis overdosed and had to be revived. Times when Elvis threatened people with guns while hallucinating. Moments when Elvis broke down crying, admitting he did not know how to stop but begging people not to take his pills away because he could not sleep, could not perform, could not exist without them. Those recordings were too raw, too legally dangerous, and too heartbreaking to air on television. Networks that interviewed Red in the years after Elvis's death edited out the most disturbing material, leaving only the sanitized version of events that audiences could handle. But people who worked on those interviews and documentaries have said that the full footage exists somewhere, and that it shows a level of pain and desperation in Red's voice that makes it clear he was not trying to hurt Elvis. He was trying to save him. Elvis died on August 16, 1977, just 16 days after Elvis, What Happened, was published. The timing has haunted Red for the rest of his life. Did the book push Elvis over the edge? Did the betrayal he felt from Red contribute to his death? Or was Elvis already so far gone that nothing could have saved him? Red believed the latter. In interviews after Elvis's death, Red explained that Elvis had been on a path toward destruction for years, and that the book was a desperate last attempt to shock him into getting help. Red never made significant money from the book. He never sought fame or attention from it. He just wanted Elvis to read it, to see himself through the eyes of people who loved him, and to realize how bad things had gotten. But Elvis never read it. According to his inner circle, Elvis refused to even look at the book. He heard about it from others, heard the accusations and the revelations, and decided that Red had betrayed him. And that was the end of their friendship. Red West lived with that pain for the rest of his life. He gave interviews where he talked about his time with Elvis, always speaking with love and regret rather than bitterness. He worked as an actor and stuntman, appearing in films and television shows, but he was always known primarily as the man who wrote the book about Elvis. He attended Elvis Week events in Memphis, where fans were divided about him. Some saw him as a traitor who exploited Elvis for money. Others saw him as a loyal friend who tried to do the right thing and was punished for it. Red died on July 18, 2017, at the age of 81. In one of his final interviews, he was asked if he regretted writing the book. He said no. He regretted that it did not work, that Elvis did not get the help he needed, and that their friendship ended the way it did. But he did not regret trying. The unseen footage that allegedly exists, the raw recordings and unedited interviews where Red describes what he saw in those final years, represents a truth that was too painful for most people to confront. It shows a man who loved Elvis deeply, who sacrificed his own reputation and livelihood to try to save him, and who lived with the guilt and grief of failing, even though the failure was not his fault. What Red West saw ended Elvis Presley, not in the literal sense of causing his death, but in the sense of being a witness to the slow-motion collapse that everyone around Elvis enabled or ignored. Red saw the pills, the doctors, the hangers-on, and the isolation. He saw Elvis's humanity being crushed under the weight of being a legend, and he saw that no one else was willing to tell the truth, so he did it himself, knowing it would cost him everything. The most disturbing unseen footage is not just Elvis stumbling or passing out, it is Red West, years after Elvis's death, looking into a camera with tears in his eyes, saying that he tried to save his friend, and his friend never forgave him for it. That is the real tragedy. Not that Elvis died, but that the people who loved him most were pushed away for trying to help, and the people who enabled him stayed until the end. Red West believed that what ended Elvis was not one night in a bathroom on August 16, 1977. It was years of prescription, abuse, isolation, and a circle of people who stopped saying no. And Red's final message, the one captured in those unseen recordings, was a warning. That loyalty sometimes means telling the truth, even when it costs you everything, and that loving someone means being willing to lose them if it gives them a chance to save themselves. What do you think Red West really saw that convinced him he had to write that book? And if the unseen footage ever surfaces, showing just how bad things were in those final years, would it change the way we remember Elvis? Or would it just confirm what we have always known, but did not want to believe? Let us know your thoughts, and if this story made you see the end of Elvis's life in a different light. Make sure to subscribe for more untold stories about the legends we thought we knew.